It's a good deaf. Huh? No. Even water, I'm good, bro. Sit down. Assalamu alaikum, Najib. How you doing? Alhamdulillah. MashaAllah. Tamam. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim taslima. Allahumma allimna ma yanfa'una. We ask Allah to teach us that which is beneficial to us. Wanfa'na bima 'allamtana. To benefit us by that which He teaches us, وَزِدْنَا عِلْمًا وَعَمَلًا, and to increase us in knowledge and in practice. MashaAllah. MashaAllah. This microphone is loud. Khair. So we're here today to kind of kick off, it seems like, a new series that will occur every Monday whenever, MashaAllah, the beautiful Imam of this masjid, Imam Majid, is absent. And I thought that's really smart. And we actually see this in many Islamic schools. That whenever a teacher is absent, that instead of kind of continuing whatever that teacher is teaching, they do a separate book so that kind of everyone has their, how do you say this? It's proper adab. So you're not taking, for example, from Imam Majid's teaching, right? But rather you're still benefiting, the class still continues, the time slot is still sacred, but there's another benefit that's going on. And the book, mashallah, is called Matharat Qulub by the great Imam Mawlud. Kind of rhymes. I don't know if he did that on purpose. So Mathara comes from Tahara. Tahara, everyone means? Purity, purification, cleanliness. Qulub is the plural of? Qalb, right? So the purification of the hearts, the cleanliness of the hearts. And before we can begin any subject, before we can begin any book, we have to talk about the author. Now, mashallah, we're blessed that Sheikh Hamza Yusuf decided to take this book, not only translate the poem, because it's a poem. And I wrongly said book, I should have said poem. It is a poem. And Sheikh Hamza decided to skillfully translate the poem, along with add his own commentary. So this edition that I'm sure everyone is aware of is really good. The one thing it is missing, and I'm not sure why, I kind of wish we would have asked Sheikh Hamza when he was here, is he didn't include an introduction to the author. He didn't include an introduction to the author. Allah knows best why. So if someone does have an edition that has an introduction to the author, I would like to see that, inshallah. With that being said, whenever we talk about scholars, whether they be male or female, whether they be scholars of a particular subject, it's important that we remind ourselves of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, in Surah An-Nur, after the verse of Nur, Allahu Nur as-samawati wal-ard, Allah is the light of the heavens and the earth. And that verse goes on. After that verse, Allah says, بَعْدَ أَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ الرَّجِيمِ فِي بُيُوتٍ أَذِنَ اللَّهُ أَن تُرْفَعَ وَيُذْكَرْ فِيهَا اسْمُهُ يُسَبِّحُ لَهُ فِيهَا بِالْغُدُوِّ وَالْآصَالِ. Verily there are houses that shine in the worship of Allah, like this place here, may Allah accept. And God has ordained, Allah has demanded that these places be raised, they never be looked down upon, and that He be remembered in them. He be remembered in them. رِجَالٌ لَا تُلْهِيهِمْ تِجَارَةٌ وَلَا بَيْعٌ عَنْ ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. And verily in these houses, in places of worship, you will find, right, men. And men here is not restricted to men, but rather worshippers of Allah, who are not distracted from business or any type of dunyawi venture from the remembrance of God. And Allah ends it by saying, يَخَافُونَ يَوْمًا تَتَقَلَّبُ فِيهِ الْقُلُوبُ وَالْأَبْصَارِ. They're not distracted from the remembrance of God, from anything. And rather, moreover, they fear the day where the hearts and the eyes will churn over, meaning they fear the day of judgment. May Allah make us among them. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, إِنَّ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافِ اللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ لَآيَاتٍ لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. Verily, in the heavens and in the earth, and in the movement of the night and the day, there are signs, meaning signs that Allah has placed for us to realize them and remember Him, for those who use their minds. It is scholarly consensus that among these signs are men and women who devoted themselves to Allah, who devoted themselves to the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to preserve and keep this religion continuing. Among these individuals was the great Imam Muhammad Mawlud al-Mauritani, right, from Mauritania. Muhammad Mawlud, the author of Purification of the Heart, is not too long ago. What year are we in currently, Hijrah? 1444. Imam Mawlud was born 1260. That's what, 180 years, give or take, right? Which is 1844 in the calendar we use. So 1260 Hijrah, he's born. And he's born in Mauritania, which is, if anyone knows about Mauritania, it's a desert country that primarily has people who are farmers. They're nomadic people. They set up camp. They go from one place to one place. I mean, now in the capital, mashallah, it's booming and buzzing. But that was the general gist of Mauritania. Despite those harsh environments, like many other Muslim countries, Mauritania develops a deep and sophisticated system of preserving Islam. Right? They developed what is called the Mahdara system. The word Mahdara is synonymous with madrasa, is synonymous with ribat, is synonymous with jami'ah. Every Muslim culture, every Muslim society had what was called the school or the university. The place where you could go and study. You would study Islam, and in some cases you would study beyond Islam. So in Yemen, for example, it was called the Ribat. That's what they called their universities, right? In the subcontinent, it's called the Madrasa, right? Along with, for example, Morocco as well, and it has different names. In Mauritania, it's called the Mahdara, which is interesting, right? Because it comes from the root letters Hadara. Who's Hadir? What does Hadir mean? To be present. So Mahdara is the place of presence. It's the place where you're focused. It's the place where you're there and you're not distracted. This system is there, and Imam Mawlud is born into a family that not only his siblings, but his father and his father's father and his father's father's father and his mother and her mother and her mother's mother's mother, they all were deeply entrenched in this system. Meaning, he's born into a family of scholars. And not everyone is like that. Look at Imam Nawawi. Imam Nawawi is not like that, and he becomes a great Imam. Imam Mawlud is blessed to be born into a family of scholarship, and so of course, he continues that path. Interesting point. His father's name was Ahmed, was a qadi. Who's a qadi? Judge. Judgeship for scholars is one of the most fearful things. I guess for like corporate IT people, I don't know, what's scary for corporate IT people? Getting audited. Right? Why is judgeship so scary? Because it's not like being a mufti. Being a mufti, right? You have the knowledge to back you up. You have other scholars as well. You give, to the best of your ability an answer. When you're a qadi, you are now giving answers on behalf of Islamic governance. And not, when you're a mufti, you're answering an individual. When you're a qadi, you're answering a community. And so people would run and run and run away from this. There's so many stories about physical running. Whenever a true scholar was identified in a community, and the government would come to him and say, hey, can we hire you to become a judge? He would leave that community and go somewhere else. Right? Because to speak on behalf of Allah and His Messenger, such that it becomes government, is a very, very frightening thing. Yet, people do it on WhatsApp all the time. So it just shows you that this is our inheritance, these are our people, this is what they did, and we just take it so lightly and just, may Allah forgive us. Not only was his father a judge, but his father's father was a judge, and his father's father's father was a judge. And you might say, you just said they're scared of being judges. Why are they all judges? Because someone has to do it. Someone has to do it. Imam Mawlud, he went the other direction. And Imam Mawlud decided that he was not going to take on judgeship, even though he's qualified for it, but he chose to write books. To write books, to write poems, and he focused mainly on two subjects. He wrote in a lot of subjects, but he focused on two subjects. Right? The first is called tasawwuf, or tazkiyah, or whatever you want to call it, purification of the heart, spirituality. And the second is the Arabic language. Right? Mauritanians are all about the Arabic language. And, mashallah, we can go into that another time. His lineage is really beautiful. Right? His family's lineage, they're called the Yaqubeen. And it goes back to Ja'far ibn Abi Talib. Who's Ja'far ibn Abi Talib? The cousin of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. How does Ja'far die? He dies as a martyr in the battle of Mu'tah. Right? And for anyone who's from that region, he's buried in Karak, Jordan. Right? Which is about 2-3 hours outside of Amman. And so, mashallah, he's essentially from the family of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Right? So Imam Mawlud, he's not an actual descendant of Fatima and Ali, but he's from the family of the Prophet ﷺ through Sayyidina Ja'far. Here we go. So he's a kid. While he's still a kid, meaning before 10 years old, he memorizes the entire Quran. Who knows in Mauritania, how do you memorize the Quran? What do you have to do to memorize the Quran? You have to write the entire Quran down along with having memorized it. So not only do you have to have proper tajweed, not only do you have to spend time memorize every single word for word, but you have to know proper Arabic script, right? As a child, and you write it down on these wooden boards, which is called a lawh, right? And when you go to your teacher, you present your page for the day on the board. If it's good, he checks it. Then you recite your memorization. He finished this before he was 10. Rahimahullah ta'ala. Right? And for them, this is not a big oh my goodness, wow, we need to have a party in the masjid. This was their tradition. This is what they did. Even if they knew their child was going to go become like a businessman, right? Just live like a normal, good life. Most likely he was going to be a hafiz. Right? That's how our people were, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward them. After doing hifz, 11, 12 years old, he then enters the mahdara. He enters the Islamic university, the Islamic seminary. And he begins to learn advanced tajweed. And he begins to learn fiqh, Islamic law. He begins to learn Arabic grammar. Now, what is also unique about the Mauritanian tradition is it is not like this at all. It is one-on-one. The class, you might walk into a class and it'd be 50 students. Right? Each student goes to the teacher anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes, learns their lesson, that's it. What do you do for the rest of the day? You memorize the entire lesson, you review the previous lesson, and you prepare the next lesson. The better you review and prepare, the more time the shaykh is going to give you. The more you're going to get out of your class. But it's one-on-one. And you might say, where did that come from? Hadith Jibreel. Jibreel comes to the Prophet ﷺ among the companions. Right? The companions don't know. What does the hadith say? He sits in front of the Prophet ﷺ, فَأَسْنَدَ رُكْبَتَيْهِ إِلَى رُكْبَتَيْهِ. He connects his knees to the Prophet ﷺ's knees and puts his hands on the Prophet ﷺ's thighs and starts to learn from the Prophet ﷺ by asking questions. Right? So it's a really, really beautiful tradition. Some schools in the subcontinent, in Yemen and other places, they've taken that tradition. But for the most part, other places are like this. It's lecture style. Right? That way of teaching and that way of studying is something really, really amazing. And anyone who's done that for like 10 years, they're just different. They're on a different level. Right? And may Allah reward them. And may Allah give us opportunities to study like that, right? Only after having been in the Mahdara for a year. So he's around 13 or 14 now. Okay? And Allah knows best. He could be older. I couldn't really figure it out. He could be older. He decides to leave. He studies a lot. After a year, he decides to leave. And he's already such a strong student/scholar that when he leaves, right, students follow him. And they want to study with him. He's young. Right? But he's strong in knowledge. And obviously, no one would leave a school to go study with one scholar if all they had was knowledge. He definitely had a spiritual state with Allah. You ever meet someone, right? And like you're just like, mashallah, this person is I just want to spend time with this person. Right? It's not necessarily because they're knowledge. It's because they have a connection to Allah that is just attractive. And this comes from the Hadith. Someone might say, man, you're talking weird. What do you mean? What is the Prophet ﷺ said, when Allah loves someone, He calls out to Jibreel. Ya Jibreel, I love so-and-so. فَأَحِبَّهُ. Now you must love him. Then Jibreel goes to the rest of the angels and says, oh angels, Allah loves so-and-so, and I love so-and-so. So now you all must love him. How does the hadith end? ثُمَّ يُوضَعُ لَهُ قَبُولٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ. Then Allah places the acceptance of this individual in the hearts of all people who are on the earth. And now everyone on earth loves this person. Why? Because they have a lot of knowledge? Nope, Allah loves them. And the heavens love him. Or love her. MashaAllah. So Imam Mawlud continues to study and he's teaching like on a part-time basis, and then he establishes his own school. Right? And it was amazing. One of his students writes that in the school of Imam Mawlud, there was 40 students all studying the same book, the same page. The same page. But they all went up to him one by one. They were on the same page. But that style, they didn't leave it because it works. And if I can tangent really quickly, one of the things that we are tested with in our time and in our country specifically, in the American Muslim community, is that we're always trying to be innovative. We're always trying to be innovative. But what's the new thing that we can do what's the new thing that we can do, right? I think it's important to be innovative. But before you're innovative, look back. Did what they do work? Right? If it worked, then take what they did, or at least the spirit of what they did, and establish it. And then if it doesn't work, be innovative. Bismillah. Why do we start with trying to be innovative? That's a problem. Right? Now, MashaAllah, Imam Mawlud goes on to have 4 children. Muhammad al-Amin, Umayma, Khadija. 5 children. And Sa'da. And MashaAllah, all of his children, his 2 sons and his 3 daughters, they all go on to become great scholars. To the point that Muhammad, his oldest son, they said about him that anyone who would meet him would forget about Imam Mawlud. And that's something else that we should know. Right? We come from a tradition where elders wanted the young ones to become better than them. This is really important. Elders wanted they wanted the young ones to excel them, to be better than them. Not just verbally, but they did whatever they can do so that the next generation would be better than them. Not follow them. Be better than them. That's all I'll say about that. But mashallah, his daughters became teachers. One of his daughters, she wrote a beautiful poem on the life of the Prophet ﷺ that then became studied in Mauritania. And so he was just a man who really engaged in worship, recited Quran, and wrote books. And that's what he did. He taught, he connected to the Quran, he worshipped his Lord, and he authored books. One situation I wanted to mention here I think is really beautiful about his life. Bismillah. Straw has a hole in it, I think. What's the ruling of taking 3 sips in a straw? his school, keep in mind that Mauritanians, especially in his time, were nomadic. So the school would be in one place, and it was time to move, Everyone took their tents and went somewhere else. So one time they parked their school next to the vicinity of a wealthy family. Okay? And it was at this time that Imam Mawlud was writing one of his books. And this book is, or rather this poem, was on the etiquettes of giving charity. Who you should give charity to, who are people who should really give charity, what are the benefits behind it, all that kind of stuff. Which any scholar would write about. Where was he writing this book? In a vicinity where close by there lived a wealthy family. Out of fear that anyone thinks Muhammad Mawlud wrote this book with the intention that rich family give money to the school, he delayed making this book public till he left that place. Again, the book is ready. He can make it public to the students. He decides not to. Why? Because it's about charity. And he doesn't want anyone to think that this scholar wrote this book so that rich family gives money. I mean, just the lessons you can take from that story. We all need to remember that we come from a tradition where knowledge is respected. Knowledge is honored, and whoever contains it properly, holds it in their chest, right, is also honorable, is also respected. So it's not befitting that a scholar who has the words of Allah and the Rasul ﷺ in their heart bend their necks out to wealthy people for money. It's extremely important. Even if it means you can't establish a proper school. Even if it means you can't get big buildings. Even if it means that you won't be able to have more students. No. Because the ihtiram and the sacredness and the dignity of knowledge and the carrier of knowledge must remain intact. And that's why Imam Mawlud delayed this book even being made public. So no one thinks ill of knowledge and no one thinks ill of those who carry it. We live in a time of fitna. Ask every, what am I trying to say here? Not every uncle or auntie, but ask every other uncle or auntie, right? What do you think about scholars? And see what they say. Just do it. See what they say. I guarantee you, 50% minimum, I'm being generous. 50% will talk ill of scholars. And you know what? It's not even their fault. Because of what scholars are doing in the name of knowledge. This is very, very dangerous. I'm giving you a small example from the life of a real scholar. May Allah reward him. MashaAllah. One of the things he really was scared of, and may Allah forgive us, Ya Rab. One of the things Imam Mawlud was scared of was talking about dunya in a masjid. And think about it, right? Mauritanians are nomadic people. So, where do they generally gather? In the masjid, right? When it comes time to talking about, hey, where are we going to move next? It's getting really hot in this area. We can't really, plant food and get food in this area. There's no animals in this area. They're going to talk about that in the masjid. Imam Mawlud, whenever the community would get together to talk about dunya, he would remain quiet and go in the corner and read Quran. Right? Why? Not because he didn't want to talk about dunya. That's important. There are things about the dunya that we need to talk about, and they're very important. We shouldn't delay them. But not in the house of Allah. إِنَّمَا الْمَسَاجِدُ لِلَّهِ. Right? The houses of worship are for God. For God means only Allah should be mentioned. Only that which Allah loves should be mentioned. So this was a trait of Imam Mawlud, that those who took from him, they took on that trait as well. And he authored over 70 books, rahimahullah ta'ala. He authored over 70 books. And most of them, it's interesting, most of them are poems on having good character. Not even purification of the heart. This book is purification of the heart. Tazkiyah, tasawwuf, whatever you call it. Most of his books were on just having good character. So for example, and I recommend everyone go and listen to this series. He has a poem on the prohibitions of the tongue. Notice how he doesn't even consider it purification of the heart. He considers watching what you say just being a good person. Right? So there's a difference in our tradition in Islam between actual tasawwuf and tazkiyah and purifying the heart and what is called adab, which means good character, good manners. So many people, they like, oh, purification of the heart, I want to study that. Okay, how is your adab? You might want to work on that first. How is your character? Right? How is your outward character before we start talking inward? So he has a book, mashallah, on a poem, sorry, I keep saying book, on the prohibitions of the tongue. He has a really cool chapter in there on music as well. It's interesting. He has a book on, a poem on being good to parents, birr al-walidain. Right, birr al-walidain, something that not only does our tradition take very seriously, but in Mauritania, right, if it became known to a teacher that their student was not good to their parent, it was a means of suspension from the school. Right? If you're not good to your parent, even though everyone knows here it's difficult to be good to parents, it's not an easy thing. Likewise, for a parent to have a good relationship with their child is a very difficult thing, right? But if you can't have honor for your parents, how are you going to have honor for knowledge in the words of Allah and the words of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam? That's the thinking behind it. He has a poem on how to host guests when they come to your house. That's really beautiful. In their case, when they come to your tent. MashaAllah. And he has a poem on the etiquettes of the masjid and how one should be in the masjid. May Allah grant us beautiful character inside and outside the masjid. The poem on parents and the tongue is translated. You can find them PDFs online. Most of his books are not translated. At least we got 3 of them. Inshallah. He also has a poem on valuing time. I just forgot the name of it. That's really cool. MashaAllah. We said that he was born in 1260, I believe that's what we said, right? Let me just check that again. 1260 Hijri, and he passes away in 1323 Hijri. 1323, 1260, how old was he? 63? 62, 63. Which one? 1260, he's born. 1323, he passes away. 63. So he passes when the Prophet ﷺ passed away, mashallah. He experienced a light sickness, and the light sickness didn't last long, but he passed away from it. And mashallah, he left an amazing, amazing legacy of scholarship. To this day, in Mauritania, his books are taught. Murabat al-Hajj, may Allah have mercy on him, who's the teacher of Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, and many others, when he decided to go and establish his own school, his own mahdara, he really took on a lot of this curriculum of Imam Mawlud. One of those books is Matharat Qulub. So that's all I kind of want to talk about Imam Mawlud. Of course, when talking about great scholars of the past, there's a lot more you can say, but inshallah, with the intention of starting this book so that inshallah it can be finished, I thought we should also start the book today. But I wanted to just speak briefly on this topic, right? Purifying the heart. Imam al-Ghazali, in his book of knowledge in the Ihya al-Madin, does anyone know where Imam Majid is currently in his Monday class? Like what chapter of the Ihya al-Madin? So he's toward the end then, okay. MashaAllah. MashaAllah. Yeah, Imam al-Ghazali very clearly states, knowledge is of 2 types, inward and outward. And the Sharia, the sacred law that Allah revealed to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, talks about both. And so anyone who only focuses on what is outward and not inward has not done service to the sacred law. Anyone who has only focuses on inward and what is not outward has not done a service to the sacred law. Right? And so, the beauty is that we have Islam which is how we practice this religion, also known as fiqh. We have aqidah, which is what we believe in. And what we believe in is who we are. So it's extremely important to know, but in detail, what is it that we believe in? Because the more you know what you believe in, the more you know yourself. And we have a crisis of identity in the time that we live in, right? I guarantee you everyone here knows someone, or maybe even themselves, that they question themselves, right? Who am I? What do I stand for? When you study the science of belief, you're studying who you are. Because you're studying what you believe in, Allah and His messengers, and Allah's attributes and the attributes of the messengers, alayhi salatu wasalam, and the unseen and whatnot. And then we have this inward aspect, which is about the heart. The Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّ فِي الْجَسَدِ مُضْغَةً إِذَا صَلُحَتْ صَلَحَتِ الْجَسَدُ كُلُّ وَإِذَا فَسَدَتْ فَسَدَتِ الْجَسَدُ كُلُّ أَلَا وَهِيَ الْقَلْبُ. Verily there is a piece of flesh in the body. If it is made whole, then the entire body is made whole. Meaning, if it's good to go, the entire body is good to go. If it's purified, the entire body is purified. If it's clean and well, the entire body is clean and well. But if it is corrupted, then the entire body is corrupted. And of course, what we understand from that, if it is corrupted, then the entire body and what the body does with its limbs is also corrupted. أَلَا وَهِيَ الْقَلْبُ. Verily that piece of flesh is the heart. And that's why Imam Mawlud called his book Purification of the Heart. Someone might say, oh, this topic of purifying the heart did not come till later in Islam. That is not true. This hadith that I just mentioned to you is from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So obviously, they're speaking about the heart. In the time of the Sahaba, right? They were speaking about it, but again, only in words the Prophet ﷺ used. In the time of the Tabi'een, the generation after the companions, this became known as zuhud, the science of zuhud, the science of renunciation, right? The renunciation of the heart from that which Allah dislikes. Right? It became known as zuhud. And it was so popular, right, that students would go to their teacher and they would say, when are you going to write a book on zuhud? Right? It became a popular subject because it's so important. Right? And someone once went to the student of Abu Hanifa. The student of Abu Hanifa, his name was Muhammad bin Hassan al-Shaybani. Very large man, very handsome man. And so one of his students came up to him and said, when are you going to write a book on zuhud like everyone else? Right? Yeah, meaning a book that talks about purification of the heart, all that kind of stuff. He said, I did. He said, oh, we don't have it. He said, no, I did write it. I wrote a book on the rules of business. And if you can follow those rules, trust me, you're going to be a person whose heart is purified. Right? The Prophet ﷺ said, التاجر الصدوق الأمين المسلم مع الشهداء يوم القيامة. Verily the businessman who is honest, who is trustworthy, and who is Muslim will be counted amongst the martyrs, those who die in the cause of Allah on the Day of Judgment. Because it's not easy being an honest businessman. It's not easy being a trustworthy person when it comes to business. Let me just inflate the price a little bit. No. So in the early times it was known as zuhud, and then later on it's given titles such as tazkiyatun nafs, rectifying the heart, such as tasawwuf, right, which comes from the word Sufi, and which means wool, right, which means wool, because the people who were known to renounce the dunya, they generally wore wool, right, because it was coarse. It was coarse and it was a little bit cheaper material, and it lasted longer. So that's why it becomes known as the science of tasawwuf. It also is known by many other names. If I can tangent here for a second, I think purification of the heart, mashallah, has gotten a second wind in our communities. But it is not a science that can just be talked about. It needs to be practiced. And majority of its practice is on an individual level. You have to face yourself, what is good about yourself and what is corrupted about yourself. And you have to sit down with that, right? And if you don't like confrontation, it's going to be a hard sit down. It's going to be a hard look in the mirror, right? But you have to literally confront yourself and say, this is what's bad about me. I need to remove this. What's my game plan? Imam al-Junayd, who is known as Junayd al-Baghdadi, and he's from the early 200 Hijri that time. He's one of the first to really start to, talk about this on a much more organized level. No, I'm misquoting him. It's not Imam Junayd. I'm forgetting who I'm trying to quote. Anyways, one of the scholars, they said something really befitting. They said, Tasawwuf in the early times of Islam was a reality that people practiced and it had no name. It was a reality that everyone practiced. Everyone was engaged in purifying their heart, but it had no name. Again, tazkiyah, tasawwuf, those terms, they came later. Now in our time, tasawwuf and tazkiyah and purification of the heart is a name that everyone knows. But the reality is gone. No one's practicing it. Right? And so we need to be very careful, inshallah, when going through this book, that everything you all learn from whoever's up here, and whatever the teacher is reading to you all, we all need to have the intention to practice all of this. And it's majorly going to be on an individual level. Right? Beware, beware, beware of attaching the purification of your heart to community. You can attach the upliftment of your iman to community. That's fine, right? You can attach the learning of this religion to community, what goes on in the masjid. But beware of attaching the purification of your heart to community, because I promise you, if you do that, you will not purify your heart. No one can do it for you. Right? Allahu al-waliy tawfiq. Allah is the one who facilitates things, and we ask Allah to purify our hearts. And one of the du'as that's attributed to the Prophet ﷺ is a beautiful du'a. Allahumma zakki nufusana fa anta khayra man zakkaha. Oh Allah, purify our hearts because you're the best of those who purify. Right? But the hard work is going to have to come at your hands. Right? And if we were to just look at this really, really quickly, right? The first chapter is miserliness, being cheap, right? How is the community going to help you in stopping to be and stop being cheap, right? It's actually the opposite at times. You might be like, oh, should I give sadaqah? Should I not give sadaqah? And someone says, oh no, okay, next time, right? They don't know you. They don't know you. They don't know your level of if you're really miserly or not really miserly, right? You have to fight with yourself. And so if you're wondering, should I give sadaqah now or give sadaqah later? Do what is best to purify your heart. Sometimes someone will give sadaqah, but then they're angry at Allah about it. You don't give sadaqah, go do something else. Sometimes someone is really cheap, and by giving money it hurts them. Okay, you give sadaqah. And so Imam Mawlud is going to talk about that, but we're the ones who are going to have to practice it. Ooh, that's a good one. The third chapter, hatred. Hate. Right? And that could be hate for individuals, hate for people, or hate for certain situations. Right? You're the one who has to sit with yourself and say, man, what do I hate and what do I love? Community can't help you with that. So it's a very dangerous thing to attach your purification of your heart to community. May Allah protect us from that. So I encourage everyone to buy this book and to read Sheikh Hamza's introduction. It's not long at all. I think it's like 5-6 pages. But it's really nice. So definitely purchase the book, Purification of the Heart, sandala.org. And Bismillah, we begin this book with the intention that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us among those who learn the signs of purifying the heart, of how to purify the heart, and that we become among those who do it. We begin this book with the intention that Allah, just as He granted us the ability to begin, that He grants us the ability to finish. We begin this book making dua that Allah reward Imam Mawlud for all of his effort in writing this book. May Allah reward his teachers, may Allah reward his spouse, may Allah reward his children. We make dua for Shaykh Hamza Yusuf, may Allah reward him for translating this book. And with that, inshallah, we begin. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Introduction to Purification, poem, verses 1 through 8. I begin by starting with the heart of beginnings, for it is the highest and noblest of beginnings. Yani Bismillah. His first advice is have courtesy with Allah. Have good etiquette with Allah, the high, the majestic. By practicing modesty and humility. Dejected out of shame and humility, humbled in awe, imploring Him. I'm just going to read here. By giving up your designs for His. Emptied by covetousness for what His servants have, by hastening to fulfill His commands, and be wary of the subtle encroachment of bad manners. If you, the person who wants to purify their heart, realize your attributes of servitude, you will then be assisted with something of the attributes of the one who is besought, yani Allah. We'll talk about that. Realize your abject character and impoverishment, and you will gain dignity and wealth from the All-Powerful. There is no salvation like the heart's salvation, given that all the limbs and organs respond to its desires. So we'll talk about these inshallah. I just wanted to see here. Yeah, he then goes straight into, there's a little more left of the intro, and then he goes into miserliness. So, Bismillah. Of course, he begins with, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. May Allah make us among those who begin with, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Some of the scholars have said that Bismillah, right, has the meaning of the entire religion. And some say, just, if you really were to reflect over the B, right, it would really allow you to understand, right, the crux and the core of the deen. Why? Because the B in Bismillah is called Ba al-Isti'ana. It's the Ba of seeking help. When you say Bismillah, you're saying, Ya Allah, I'm seeking the help of your name in whatever action I'm about to do. And so when you tell Allah, I'm seeking your help, you're admitting right then and there, I'm not able, only you are able. And that's the core of the deen. To admit your own weakness and to affirm Allah's absolute strength. If you're able to do that, purification of the heart has gotten very easy for you. It's those, right, who see themselves as absolutely able. I'm able. I help people. I provide for my family. I do this and I do that. No, you reality, right, were Allah to say kun, were Allah to say be, you wouldn't be able to do anything. So everything returns back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's why the Prophet ﷺ said, every important matter that is not begun in the name of Allah is cut off. Majority of the scholars say, what does cut off mean? It's cut off from blessings. But it also means, right, it's cut off from reality. If you think you're doing something important and it's disconnected from Allah, then you have not understood what you're doing. And you have not understood actually what it even is to do something. So may Allah make us among those who always start with His name. And his first advice, Imam Mawlud's first advice, have courtesy with Allah, have adab with Allah, have etiquette with Allah. Right? We try and have etiquette with creation. Right? Creation is sometimes with us, and sometimes we're alone. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always seeing us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always hearing us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows our inward thoughts before we even know them. So who's more worthy to have adab with? Who's more worthy to have etiquette with? Right? And the reality is, Allah only created creation and commanded us to have good character with them so that we learn how to have good character with Him. That's the reality. Anytime you have trouble with someone, anytime you're having a hard time trying to have good etiquette with someone, understand that if you can learn how to achieve good character with this individual, you have now excelled and learned how to have better character with Allah. The more better you are with people, the more better you will be with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you're good with people and you're not good with Allah, then you're doing it wrong. That means you're doing it for the people. You still haven't figured it out. You're cut off. You're aqta. Go back. May Allah protect us. Right? This is why the Prophet ﷺ said, خَيْرُكُمْ خَيْرُكُمْ لِأَهْلِ. The best of you are those who are the best to their families. So what if you have the best character in the world to strangers? If you're bad to your family and your character is not good with your family, you're not fulfilling the Prophet ﷺ's words. The best of you are those who are best to their families. And it's much harder to have good character with family than it is with strangers. Now, he says, have courtesy with God, have good character with God by practicing modesty and humility. May Allah make us among those who are modest. May Allah make us among those who are humble. The Prophet ﷺ tells us in a Sahih Hadith, verily what I have received from the prophets before me is the following statement. Right? If you don't have modesty, then do what you will. Verily what I have received from the prophets before me is the statement, if you don't have modesty, then do what you will. Right? That's a really scary statement. First of all, it shows that it's not just something the Prophet ﷺ advised. It's something that every single nation advises, every single messenger advises their people. Be modest. And modesty is a huge topic, and we're not able to cover it in however many minutes we have left here. But the core of it, right? The core of it is if Allah, how do we say that? Right? Don't do anything you wouldn't want your Creator to see you doing. As we mentioned before, it all goes back to Aqidah. If you study your belief and you gain certainty in Allah and His attributes, and you gain certainty that when you learn He is the all-seeing, and you reflect on that and reflect on that and reflect on that, and you can live a life of awareness that He is seeing you, then don't do anything that you wouldn't want Him to see you doing. That's the core of modesty, right? But those who are cut off from their Creator, they're not going to be modest, which is why we should have merciful hearts towards, our fellow people and our fellow neighbors, right? You see what they wear, you hear some of the words that they speak. Many of them are Muslim, to be honest. Even our fellow Muslims have these issues. How many Muslims do we know who are cursing? How many Muslims do we know who are dressed improperly? Right? Look at them with mercy, because the reality is, they probably haven't studied what it means to be Muslim. No one taught them the reality of La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. Right? Maybe they weren't raised in a household where they got those opportunities. Right? So we need to look at them with the eye of mercy, but that does not negate. We shouldn't just say, oh, it's okay. No, it's not okay. We need to be modest. Right? And modesty first starts from the heart, and then it starts in the body and clothing and whatnot. And if you look at the sacred law, and what the sacred law demands that men cover, what the sacred law demands that women cover, right, is all in the spirit of modesty. That's really what it is. So may Allah make us the modest people. Humility. I'll probably end on this. He said, have good character with your Lord by modesty and humility. Humility in Arabic is tawadu'. Tawadu'. The Prophet ﷺ said in a Sahih Hadith, ما تواضع أحد لله إلا رفعه الله. No one humbles themselves for the sake of Allah except that Allah raises them. Allah will raise them in this world by making them beloved to others. And Allah will raise them in the hereafter by showing them the gifts that He's going to give them. May Allah make us a humble people. Right? If you find it difficult to be humble, as Imam Mawlud is going to teach you in this book, it is most likely because you suffer from pride. Pride that even you think you might not have. But if you find it difficult to be humble, that is the source of that is pride. And pride is a trait of shaitan. May Allah protect us from it. Humility is the salient feature among any righteous person. How many companions said, right, that we walked into the gathering of the Messenger of Allah ﷺ for the first time and we didn't know which one he was. We didn't know which one he was. He held himself humbly ﷺ. Even though he's a Rasul, he interacts with his Lord. He has angels with him at all times, so do we, but he sees them. But the companions, they would enter the gathering for the first time. Which one is Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? And this humility is passed down. Sayyidina Omar ibn al-Khattab, when he's the Khalifa, and he walks into Jerusalem, right? So how many narrations from different individuals who were there, right? No one knew they hadn't seen Umar ibn al-Khattab before. They didn't know which one is Umar, right? He didn't wear king-like clothing. And humility is the number one solution to solving problems, right? But it's very difficult. It's sour. At the beginning, it's sour. Because at the beginning, the lower self doesn't like these things. May Allah make us a humble people. It's hard to try and talk about each of these topics when there's so much to cover here. But we'll just jump to the last sentence of this first chapter, in which he says, "There's no salvation like the heart's salvation, given that all the limbs and organs respond to its desires." What did we say before? If the heart is good, the entire body is good. Which means what? It is fard. I'll leave you all with this. It is fard. It is an individual obligation for each of us to purify our hearts from those things that corrupt it. Pride, miserliness, showing off, arrogance, lying, etc. It is not an option. It is not something that's like, you know what, I want to be a good person, I'm going to purify my heart. No, my Lord has made it obligatory upon me. And if you question that, go read the Quran, flip to any page, you will find it there. It is an absolute integral part of the religion. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ تَزَكَّى. Successful are those who purify it. What's the it? It's the heart. It's just as important as fiqh, is the knowledge of law, right? It's just as important as belief. And this is why when Jibreel comes to the Rasul ﷺ 80 days before his death, he mentions all three. And so, but like we said before, it is that subject which the work is done individually. Don't connect it to community. You can connect fiqh to community, you need to study from people, I understand that. But the work that is to be done to purify your heart, you're going to have to do. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this blessed month of Rajab, that He bless us in this month, that He allow us to reach the month of Sha'ban, and that He bless us in Ramadan. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He purify our hearts, for He is the best of those who purify. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He reward the author of this book, Imam Mawlud. And we ask Allah that just as He allowed this book to begin in Adam Center, that He allow it to finish. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر والحمد لله رب العالمين.